Welcome back to another episode of Renegade Marquee on the Renegade Pop Culture Podcast Network. My name is Mike. I'll be your host for this evening. Join me, as always, is the Streamin demon, Jacob.
Hello, everybody.
We've got Hayden.
Hello, everybody.
And making his Renegade Pop Culture debut, please welcome a good friend of mine, Roman.
Howdy. Glad to be here on this
Glad to have you.
Late Tuesday evening. Taco Tuesday evening? I don't know.
Tuesday, Wednesday, time is a construct.
Correct.
So today is a very exciting day because we get to finally discuss Denis Villeneuve's passion project, Dune. But before we get there, I'd be remiss if I didn't pay a small tribute to Galena Hutchins, the cinematographer who tragically lost her life on the set of an indie film called Rust, where she was the victim of a firearm accident in which Alec Baldwin, and believe me, I know this is going to be haunting him for probably the rest of his life, and I hope he finds peace. He was given a prop gun that had live ammunition, and I just want to take a moment to acknowledge to just acknowledge this tragedy and just give my thoughts and prayers to the families of all the victims. Anyone have anything else to add?
I'll say, when I first heard of this incident, I immediately thought of what happened on the set of The Crow when Brandon Lee was shot by Michael Massey. Was the man who accidentally shot me. It was a gun blank too. Again, that's pretty haunting once you take that into account. And Michael Massey, it lived with him for the rest of his life. So I can only imagine what Alec's going through right now. It's basically what Mike said. I wish him. Yeah, I hope he eventually recovers from this. I hope that he recognizes that it wasn't his fault.
Well said.
Yeah. It's just obviously tragic and something that kind of came out of nowhere. I think it was the night that Dune had come out, actually. I had gotten out of the theater, and that, instead of the reactions to the movie, that was the first thing I saw. It was just really upsetting and just kind of really hard to process, considering obviously there's a lot going on right now with Hollywood behind the scenes that not a lot of people know about. And for this to have happen to someone with, a child to go home to and is no longer going to be going home to them, you just kind of wonder, how something like this could have happened. Obviously more details have come out, but how we even got there in the first place. And obviously it's very tragic, and hopefully it just kind of sets a precedent moving forward on safety on sets and for the crew, because we always worry about the actors, but the people making the movies are also in harm's way as well. So rest in peace.
Agreed.
I'm just going to say that in addition to that I really hope that conditions can be made better. I hope that that the hours are more fair on sets in the future, and I hope that the members of Yahtzee can come to something that will benefit them in the end, and hopefully prevent things like this from happening ever again.
Right, because at the end of the day, as much as we all love movies, quality of life, safe and safety on a movie set should be top priority.
Absolutely.
Let's also acknowledge her husband and their 9-year-old son, who are definitely reeling from this, and let's hope them all the best as well.
Well said. There's no easy transition out of this, so we will we will go right into discussing Dune, a project I know that Denis Villeneuve has been chomping at the bit to finally tackle. The film was directed, produced, and written by Denis Villeneuve, co-written by John Spates and Eric Roth, based on the 1965 novel of the same name by Frank Herbert. And for those who may not know, this is only adapting roughly half of the source material. And this film follows Paul Atreides, a brilliant and gifted young man born into a great destiny beyond his understanding, who must travel to the most dangerous planet in the universe to ensure the future of his family and his people. As malevolent forces explode into conflict over the planet's exclusive supply of the most precious resource in existence, a commodity capable of unlocking humanity's greatest potential, only those who can conquer their fear will survive. So Roman, I'm going to start with you, since you are actually coming fresh off of reading the novel for the first time, I assume.
Yeah.
So give me your general thoughts on, I guess, both the movie and the novel.
Well, first things first, I guess we'll just start with the novel because I have the complete picture there. You're talking about just one of the most well-crafted and dense novels ever written. I mean, it lives up to the hype in terms of what people sold it as. And, obviously there's been many deserving comparisons to Lord of the Rings and Star Wars, but really it's kind of a merger of those two, and kind of how it creates its own identity as like a story about just essentially traveling to the Middle East and harvesting oil, which is kind of crazy considering that it was written, about 45 years or about 35 years, 36 years before 2001. And it's just kind of telling that, for so long, this has inspired so many movies and so many other stories and so many filmmakers. For being as big a fan of Denis Villeneuve that I am, I was kind of surprised by how patient he was with this movie. And you can really feel the passion for this material just kind of bleeding into every single frame. Every single frame feels like just this entirely new genre of movie that we haven't really seen before. And I guess it's kind of a testament to the fact that the combat in this movie is swords and shields. It's kind of like a sword and sandal epic, kind of living in a sci-fi world. In that sci-fi world, setting up red flags about the future is pretty insane, just in kind of how it all comes together. Plus, the Messiah figure and how that's inspired by obvious, biblical text. It's just kind of incredible how it all came together, because it's about a myriad of things. But with the movie itself and this first half of the story, I think does a great job of understanding, foreshadowing the power of it and kind of what that means for the story. Because this movie essentially is just foreshadowing part 2, which we have confirmation of today, thank God. But yeah, it's just an overwhelming piece of material. And I think a lot of people who are experiencing Dune for the first time in this medium are really in for a treat with part 2. If you thought it is really just the beginning, I feel like I've been saying that a lot because it's like, the last line of the movie essentially. But yeah, it's incredible. And I cannot wait to see how they do the second part.
Well said. And full disclosure, I have not read the book. So this was my first exposure to the material as a master of the craft, as Villeneuve presented. I have seen like clips of David Lynch's version, but never really sat down to watch the whole thing. But this movie, I've seen this movie 3 times, twice in theaters in Dolby, and the third time I watched earlier today on HBO Max. And I gotta say, this might be a little bit controversial take for as a film fan, I think everyone should experience it in theaters once, but seeing it at home on HBO Max actually made me appreciate the material a little bit more. Maybe it's because I was in kind of my own environment and I was able to, pause the movie and really take in specific scenes and really kind of like dissect the movie as much as I could. But everything that Roman you said earlier about just like the size and the scope of this world, how Villeneuve just he had such great attention to detail with everything from the way the world was established to really getting to know each of these characters and the journeys that they're about to embark on. Overall, it's just a truly fantastic movie. Jacob, I want to go to you next. Your general thoughts?
Well, Dune, it was kind of one of those movies that film Twitter just immediately started fawning over, and they would just not respect any misgivings people may have against it. Like, oh, it's too bleak, or it's too dark, or whatever, or I don't know, like it was just and then they would just pounce on that person and say, well, then go watch MCU then, check mark, or whatever. And I did see the trailer back in like October of last year, I think. I was like, wow, that looks really interesting. Like I have seen Denis Villeneuve's several of his previous films. I've seen Sicario, I've seen Prisoners, which might be my favorite of his, and Blade Runner 2049, which was a really impressive feat, a visual feat. Like I was just completely arrested when I saw that movie in the theater. And discussing Dune, I don't know if it really reached the expectations people had for it. Like maybe not quite the masterpiece that people were hyping up to be, but I really enjoyed it. It was very captivating. Like there were long stretches where I was just awestruck by what I was seeing, just completely mesmerized by the visuals on the screen and the sound. I saw it in IMAX. Okay, and the vibrations I felt were unlike any I felt in a while. It was an incredibly immersive experience. It was quite a wonderful, actually. And Denis Villeneuve, he was the right one to tackle this. Like he gives the source material a lot of reverence and respect, and like he has full confidence in what he's putting on the screen, no matter how absurd it may be for some people. It's just, I respect, I have a lot of respect for him as a director, and I think I'm very looking forward to part 2 if it's even half as good as this.
Same. Hayden, your general thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm also mostly a novice when it comes to Dune. My first introduction was actually back when Lindsay Ellis worked for a certain site that shall not be named. She did a review of the David Lynch movie, and that was basically the extent of my knowledge before going into this. And I will say, but that the second I heard that it was Villeneuve doing this seemingly impossible task of adapting that book to film, I thought, well, of course, that's perfect choice. And he's already proven himself that he can make an impossible idea come to life in a really beautiful way. Nobody expected a sequel to Blade Runner to be nearly as good as it was, and I really, really enjoyed what he did here.
yeah, I still maintain that that as far as I've seen, Villeneuve has never made a movie less than excellent. Like everything I've seen, at least from Enemy to now, has pretty much been a 5 out of 5. If we're going by Letterboxd ratings. Now we're about to go dive full into spoilers, so consider this your one and only warning. Boy, where to even begin?
I think you kind of have to start with, personally, Timothy Chalamet. I would kind of just, we should lead off there, just because I think that the movie really doesn't work without him, and I think he was essentially pretty perfect for the role.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Now, because I haven't read the book, I don't really quite have a grasp on how Paul is supposed to be portrayed, but it seems like Chalamet kind of, for lack of a better term, understood the assignment. Because one thing I noticed about his journey is that unlike other protagonists like Luke Skywalker or even Harry Potter, his hero's journey isn't exactly a positive one, or at least so I'm told, according to some of the later novels, that this is more of a subversion of the typical hero's journey. So in that regard, I'm really excited to see where his story goes in part 2.
Oh, I can jump in. Yeah, it's if you're really excited to see where it goes in part 2, I mean, and even you kind of notice it in the movie, you really see that, you know, this boy is essentially growing into a man, and you can kind of tell based off of, you know, how he develops as a character. Once the movie begins to ask more of him as an actor, he kind of rises up to the challenge and really just delivers some awesome sequences and just really believable moments, to the point where you're kind of wondering, like, why isn't this guy in more movies? And then you realize he has been in a lot. And I think what's pretty neat about Timothy over a lot of other leading men right now, especially younger leading men, is he has such a distinct look about him, that he's a good looking guy, obviously, and he's got great chiseled features. He has a nice chin line, nice jawline. He looks great, right? But there's something about him that reminds me a lot of Joaquin Phoenix, and just how he sort of just disappears into every role and sort of uses these to his advantage. And instead of playing a typical, let's just say, Tom Holland-esque role, where or even like Mark Wahlberg or Ryan Reynolds now, where they're just kind of playing the same type of person, it's really cool to see a young actor just kind of harness this ability and turn it into something truly special, especially when you compare to what he's done in like Call Me by Your Name or Lady Bird, or even his insanely small role in Interstellar. So yeah, the movie kind of begins and ends with him, and then obviously the rest of the supporting cast. But if you're excited about where he goes next, then we're in for a treat.
Oh yeah. Hayden, you got anything to add about Paul?
I fully concur with everything being said. I thought he did a really good job, and it was, I think, a bit more of a subtle performance than a lot of people want to acknowledge. It's not really showy, but I think it works for the character and what they were trying to do. And I'm really interested in seeing his journey from here.
I think one of my favorite moments of his is when he and Lady Jessica are in the that sand tent, and he's really starting to because of the spices in the tent, he's really starting to freak out about the dream that he's having. And just the moment that he shares with Rebecca Ferguson is it's a really it's a really special moment. It's that and a scene earlier with him and Oscar Isaac as the Duke Leto Atreides. So like the one line of dialogue that just always sticks out to me is when Oscar Isaac says, a great man doesn't seek to lead, he's called to it and he answers. But if your answer is no, you'll still be the one thing I've always asked you to be, and that's my son.
Amen. Said from the man himself. I mean, this whole movie is riddled with lines and dialogue about that, and it's very philosophical and pretty existential when you really kind of get down to it. And then, yeah, it's just one thing after another with every single character in this movie and every single sequence, to the point where you're kind of just wondering how it one-ups itself every time. And then it just kind of rolls into the next sequence over and over and over again. And that's just a sign of a really special movie at work.
Yeah, there's this real gravitas to the whole thing. It really kept me engaged.
And as grand and as overwhelming as the whole experience can be, there also is a little bit of relatability to what the characters are going through. Like, I don't know if anyone else had this experience, but with Paul, one can argue that he's kind of the son. He's like the child of like parents with parents raised with like two different religious beliefs, because that's kind of what I grew up with. My dad was raised Jewish, my mom Catholic. So growing up, I kind of had the best of both worlds. And I kind of get that vibe from Chalamet's performance a little bit.
Yeah, I can see that. I definitely can see that. And I didn't even kind of think about this. Is now that you mention it, you know, his parents both stem from very different belief systems and kind of how he's met in the middle. And I guess I kind of alluded to something like that in my review as well for the movie, where sort of the boldness is of Duke Leto is kind of offset by how gentle he is. And then compare that to sort of the passion and mystery of Rebecca Ferguson's, you know, Lady Jessica. It's sort of just a neat little marriage that isn't entirely a marriage of two characters that, you know, their offspring is kind of a mix of both of them. He's deeply skilled. He's very intelligent. He's very gentle and he's very caring, but he needs to be a leader when he needs to be. And I think that's just a huge compliment to what Frank Herbert was able to accomplish, because when you look at a lot of stories, the parents don't have a prominent role in how they inform our protagonist. And even look at like something like Luke Skywalker. I mean, yeah, his dad's hanging around, but he's the big bad guy and that's really it. And he has like no real semblance or connection to his mom, you know, until the story needs him to have one. And so for this story to come out in like 1965, it's kind of incredible how every single character has a role to play and how they inform the protagonist. So I think that's pretty neat.
Agreed. Now, Hayden, there's one character in here, I guess the designated antagonist, Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. There was something you brought up earlier, that this character was, for lack of a better term, straightwashed. Isn't it true that like in the novel, his sexuality is more apparent, but they kind of tone that down for the film?
Yeah, in the book, from what I have read specifically, it frequently alludes to Baron Harkonnen having an interest in a lot of younger boys. And I am very relieved that they just kind of cut that out of this adaptation, because I don't think that's really something that we should be really presenting for the only openly queer character in your movie and turning them into the stereotypical pedophile, because that's a lot of unfortunate implications. And I'm very relieved that they were able to they made the decision to completely just excise that from the film.
I think that I think them removing that makes a lot of sense too. It just doesn't really fit within the narrative of what it's going for. It doesn't really assist in sort of the Baron's arc. It's important for the character essentially in the book, and I think you feel that. You even see that in Dune, David Lynch's Dune. You get those vibes. And that's just something David Lynch has been very good at, is allowing sexuality to be subliminally, underscored, I should say, not entirely drawing attention to it, but implying it. And that's something that Denis, I think, one of every filmmaker has their faults, and I wouldn't even really say this is his fault, is, sort of allowing his movies to be a little more freeing in terms of how characters feel for each other. But at the same time, they all kind of service the narrative in some capacity when he chooses to go the route he does.
I fully agree. And something else that I will bring up is that Frank Herbert himself does have a potentially spotty history with the gay community in general. Mm-hmm. In that it's not fully confirmed, but it is very likely that he disowned or separated from his son, who later who came out as gay and eventually passed away from HIV/AIDS in the 1990s.
Ooh.
So, and it's kind of, there's some debate over who instigated the separation, but there is some indication there, and I'm just going to say that, and just to illustrate what I was talking about with the portrayal in the book. And I think it does illuminate a little, and I think I will just compare it to I guess Orson Scott Card, and being able to remove things that aren't really necessary for the text. And I'm relieved that they were able to remove that, given all of these bits of knowledge and such.
Yeah, I'm glad they made that change. Any other like significant changes to the source material, Roman, that you feel were improvements for the film, or were, I guess, cut for time? Because for a movie that's part one, this is still pretty lengthy runtime.
Yeah, I was pretty interested to see how they would streamline all of it, because I knew we weren't going to get everything. But even then, what they gave us was all pretty much what I expected. There is one subplot from the book that I think would have gone absolutely gangbusters with audiences and really just ramped up the tension. And the movie doesn't really allude to it. I guess one of the final shots of the movie kind of does. But with Lady Jessica specifically is because Duke Leto mentions, he's like, they aren't married. It's just sort of can't think of the exact terminology, but he's the leader of a house and she's sort of from this witch essential cult, and they're not necessarily married, but they had to get married to do a certain thing. And in the book, they really allude to the fact that someone is going to try and kill the Duke. And they allude to the fact that she might be in on it because of her Bene Gesserit ways. And I think that that's something that would have worked really well for this story and done a little bit more for me, because Lady Jessica is such a fascinating character. And then where she ends up going in the second half of the book with Paul kind of explores some more of that potential tension, because there's even like people talking about, having read the book and saying like, there's this sort of like weird sexual incestual tension between Jessica and Paul. And that's in a lot of fantasy novels over the years. I mean, even just look at something like Game of Thrones. It's pretty inspired by Dune as well in terms of the political side of things, and how, marrying with the house can essentially, create, stronger bloodlines and stuff like that, however they believe it. Not that anything, happens to transpire between the two in the future, but they definitely allude to stuff like that. And I think that although Rebecca Ferguson is incredible and probably my favorite performance in the movie, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more done with that. But other than that, they kind of nailed it in terms of what is important for the story so that we can set up future events. And it's really hard to complain about an adaptation because it's kind of as close as it can get to being perfect for a book that size.
Interesting. And I have to agree with you. Rebecca Ferguson is my personal favorite performance. Chalamet is playing the most important character, but I think Ferguson gives the stronger performance, whereas the most showy performance is probably Jason Momoa as Duncan Idaho, who, to be honest, is really just playing Jason Momoa, but under the direction of a genius.
Yeah, he definitely added a lot of heart to the movie, I thought. Yeah, he was just, his name is Duncan Idaho. What's not to love about that? And a movie that takes itself this seriously.
Duncan, so Jason Momoa, I think he kind of needs to be in contention with Dave Bautista now as an actor who, you kind of see him as like, oh, he's got this really nice body, buff guy, he's a pretty face, this, that, and the other. But they're extremely talented. And I think what Denis does in this movie for Duncan and for this characters, allows Jason Momoa to kind of show his more gentle side, his softer side, his sympathetic side, instead of, the hair flipping pretty boy from Aquaman and whatnot. And he's great in that movie. He's fantastic. But yeah, I think that we're really starting to see, and Denis always been a great character actor and actors director, and he's just allowed his characters and his actors to really step into these roles and bring out the most from them. And that's just not exclusive to Dune. That's Emily Blunt and Sicario. That's what Jake Gyllenhaal does in Prisoners, which is severely underrated, or what Ryan Gosling does in Blade Runner 2049, even as well as Harrison Ford, someone who is notorious for not wanting to return to roles and kind of just, pissing all over it and not really wanting to do it. And then coming back and giving us a pretty solid supporting performance in that movie as well.
One thing I kind of joked about with Duncan Idaho is that his character arc is portrayed visually by Jason Momoa's decreasing facial hair throughout the film.
Yes, I did notice that, because people were like, "Oh, he's completely shaved," and I'm like, I thought he had a beard at like a point in the movie.
He did in the very beginning, and then by the time we get to like his last stand, he's basically clean shaven. Maybe like a little bit of 5 o'clock shadow, but that's about it.
I'm just gonna quickly bring up an allusion to Tommy Wiseau's masterpiece known as The Room, and what they do with Mark's beard in that movie. I think there's something to be said about that.
Anyway, are there any other standout performances from this honestly huge ensemble cast?
One that stuck out to me was Javier Bardem as Stilgar, the leader of the Fremen, the indigenous of the planets. He had a lot of charisma as a leader, I thought. He did kind of, I don't know about charisma, but he had a lot of grit to what he brought. Like when we first see him, he's dragged into the council room, and the first thing he does is spit. But Oscar Isaac and Jason Momoa, like, they're so intimidated by him that they just spit along with him.
A personal favorite performance of mine was actually Sharon Duncan Brewster as Liet Kynes.
She's so good.
I thought she
was
was
so good.
really, really compelling. I haven't seen her in that much. I would really like to see her doing more in the future.
Same.
Yeah, that role in the book is a white guy.
Mhm.
And so for them to go this route and just choose the best actor for the character, I mean, she's incredible. I mean, some of her moments and sort of who she resembles as a character, as well as someone who is neither a native Fremen or someone who's anti-Fremen. She is someone who's kind of caught in the middle, which is kind of, essentially what Dune is about. I'm really actually happy we haven't seen a lot of white savior takes coming from this weekend, because Dune is kind of anything but that. And a lot of people will figure this out in the follow-up in the second half, is that it's a story about embracing culture in figuring out, their language and figuring out how they live and how they've been forced to live by the government because of their conditions. And I think that says a lot. And I think it's something that we can learn from. And like I mentioned earlier, all great sci-fi does such a tremendous job of, kind of speaking a truth in the present that not a lot of people might be paying attention to, and sort of expelling some warning flags about what's to come, and or how people will be treated, or whatever it may be. I mean, you can go down an entire list of great examples, like Blade Runner, like anything by Philip K. Dick, anything, Ghost in the Shell, stuff like that. It's just sci-fi is my favorite genre for a reason, and that's one of them.
And speaking of Villeneuve, I remember in my review for Arrival saying similar things, like how that movie works as like a great parable for learning the language of another culture. In this case, just happens to be aliens. And I think he brings that similar energy to this material, not necessarily preaching a message, but teaching it in a way that's like that digestible through the journey of these characters. Another performance I wanted to bring up was, and I hope I don't butcher this last name, Babs Alusanmukan as Jamis, one of the other Freemen that Paul sees in his visions, and eventually kills in combat. I thought he did a really good job.
Sorry, say that one more time. You had cut out for me.
I was talking about the actor who played Jamis. I'm not gonna try to pronounce that last name again, but I thought he did a great job with that role. I have some critiques about where the film kind of ends. As much as, like, as important as the final like that battle is between Paul and Jamis in the siege, I just think like compared to other moments in the film, that the ending left a little bit to be desired. But I thought the performance of the guy who played Jamis was just really, really excellent.
Yeah, there's something to be said about pretty much every single person who plays a native Fremen. There's something about him that is very intelligent, but intriguing, and seems like an overly dramatic word to use, but maybe like esoteric. There's just a lot of words that you can use to sort of describe those characters and how they're played. It's kind of hard to frame it without having, like, talking about the second one or the second half, because there's just a lot of stuff that they end up going into in regards to the culture and the creed of the Fremen and how that sort of informs how they live or the relationships they build with people, and why this relationship or soon to be relationship between Paul and Shani is just really impressive. I mean, I genuinely, like I've said it before and I'll say it again, I cannot wait to see how they manage to visualize a lot of the stuff from the second half of that book.
Yeah, there's a lot that I'm looking forward to. I'm hoping between now and the release date of part 2 that I'm able to actually dive into the novels, because now that like I've experienced at least part of the story, I'm all in now. Like I'm so invested in this world and these characters. Jacob, are there any other standout performances before we move on to other topics? Because there's a lot to get through with this film.
I thought Zendaya was good. Zendaya, she had a real intensity to her role as well, and I kind of liked the kind of bait and switch they made, where at first we see her in Paul's dreams and you think, oh, you know, she's going to be the girl who's going to fawn over him, she's going to be his biggest cheerleader. But then when we see her, she just kind of gives him this icy stare. And she even tells him, she gives him this dagger that he sees in his dreams, and she says, you know, it'd be a great honor for you to die in combat with this. Like, wow.
We talk about the scale, or
yeah.
just the action or the score. I mean,
actually, yeah. Can we talk about the score, because I don't want to. I don't want to risk recency bias, but I have to admit that this might be my favorite Hans Zimmer score that I've heard in a while. And I know he's done a couple this year alone. But one of the reasons why I love this score so much is kind of the same reason why I love his score for The Prince of Egypt, which, as you guys know, is my favorite movie of all time. And I can't really place my finger on why. It might be because both of them, you can kind of hear inspiration from Lawrence of Arabia in certain musical cues, and obviously with a film like Dune, you know, it's pretty easy to make those musical comparisons.
I completely agree. I think, well, I agree with this in the sense that it reminded me a lot of Lawrence of Arabia, and it's very different. Obviously, I mean, I've never heard anything like the Dune score, and I think it should earn him his second Oscar, deservedly so. Just because it creates like an entirely new type of sound that I don't think we've ever heard in film before. And when you have these beats similar to Lawrence of Arabia, I mean, all I've listened to is the score since I've seen the movie. And he really channeled a lot of like these grand scale epics, and how the music plays a part in conveying a lot of what we're seeing. I mean, even it reminded me a lot of Blade Runner in that sense too, where the score, I mean, maybe it's from a source in the film, in the world, or maybe it's not. So diegetic or non-diegetic sound. Maybe the ships are creating the sound, and then you hear the voices and how that resembles like just something a little more natural compared to the mechanical sounds of the drums that are pounding or the synth waves that he's creating. It's a really special piece of work that the movie simply wouldn't be the same without it. One, and two, it's just another notch in his belt of being one of the greatest composers of all time.
Oh yeah. And I'm really thankful for Christopher Nolan for allowing him to do this score instead of Tenet. Not to throw Ludwig Göransson under the bus, because his score was great too, but Hans Zimmer needed to be involved in this project, and I'm thankful that that he had the opportunity. Hayden, your thoughts on the score?
Everything being said here, I completely agree. Absolutely my favorite Zimmer score in a while. Just something about it is really raw, and it just kind of does like kind of sneak into your soul in a way that I found really, really powerful.
And jumping off what Roman kind of alluded to earlier, the sound design in this film is really something unique. Roman, when they talk about the voice in the novel, did you what were you imagining the voice to sound like in film, and was this anywhere close to what you pictured?
I can tell you not that at all. And when we do finally get it, I loved it. I loved the way that they made the voice sound, just because you can quickly tell it's overpowering, obviously because it's loud, but two, because it does sound sort of maniacal, sort of like witch-ish, I guess is a terrible way of explaining it, but it sounded just very commanding and very puzzling, and just something that was like pretty impressive just in terms of how they ended up creating that sound and allowing it to be so overbearing for the people that they were trying to manipulate.
From what little I know of the novel, it seems like it's a little bit more of a brute force in the film, whereas at least with Lady Jessica, it's a little more subtle, more I think the word they used was like insidious. But I really like the way it was portrayed in this version. Hayden, what about you?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what's being said. I don't have much to add.
Let's see. Yeah, I think we do need to talk about the action, because I don't think like outside of maybe Sicario, I don't really see Villeneuve as like as necessarily proficient in action scenes, but I do think he handles it a lot better than Nolan. And pretty much anytime Jason Momoa is on screen and he gets to swing those swords around, that's like those are often some of the coolest action scenes throughout the film.
Yeah, doing action on this scale and at this pace and is obviously very difficult. It's not using a lot of physical stand-ins and actors like they did on, say, something like Lord of the Rings, and it's a little more reminiscent of Avatar in a sense. But it still feels so big because they're able to have these large visual effects that tower over characters and create a true sense of space and awe. I mean, the big moment is the ornithopter sequence in the spice harvester getting swallowed by a big worm, number 1 or 2 or whatever big worm, whatever his name is. But there's just a really impressive way of just directing all that. I mean, you look at a lot of other directors who are doing big movies right now, and a lot of commercially successful directors, and they're trying to do big action, and it just doesn't really transpire or feel the same or feel like it leaves you with an impact. But with this, I mean, obviously because Twitter's been loading up my feed with images and GIFs of Dune, but I haven't gotten it out of my head of that sequence when they're flying away from the worm and you just see it swallowing that harvester whole and see how small they are in relation to something as large as that. And that's kind of the case for all the action. And that's why when there is personal combat and it is one-on-one or it is up close, like let's say the ending of the movie, it just feels so intense and so aggressive and so visceral compared to something that is just kind of basking in the sets and basking in the sights and sounds of the world. And that's just a huge testament to everyone involved for one, and two, Denis, especially just because no one's really making movies like him right now, let alone at this level on kind of the biggest stage possible.
Oh yeah, yeah. Denis is certainly one of a kind. When it comes to delivering, and I hate using this term, the thinking man's sci-fi. Hayden, anything else to add?
Yeah, I think that it's interesting how he did action. It doesn't really feel like the action was the point, which is something that I can respect for the movie, and I think it worked for the story that was being told. The action like happens, but it's not really the focus or the point as much as what the action is like doing.
It's like the action is like punctuation marks in between like bigger character moments, if that makes any sense.
Correct.
Yeah, they allude to a couple big sequences in that tent sequence in the movie, and if this is any indication, I think that once visual effects are cleaned up, and because what to me a lot of people aren't noticing either or haven't been talking about, or because maybe they have noticed it, is the movie is essentially desaturated in a sense, but the very last scene of the movie seems like the sky is getting a little bit clearer. And I think that's something that's sort of a visual aid for maybe the light at the end of the tunnel, or things are bound to get better now that this Muad'Dib figure is stepping into the role. So I don't know. I'm really curious to see how they're going to kind of change things up in the second half.
Yeah, that's actually something I noticed. Like either the second or the third time I saw the movie, I was really paying attention to the color grading, and sort of the different, especially the difference between, reality and Paul's visions. I noticed the visions are definitely like seep. They're more seeped in like gold and sort of more like warmer sort of metallic colors, whereas in reality it feels a lot colder. It's like the colors are definitely muted, but yeah, once you see that final shot, it definitely feels like, it's all uphill from here.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, uphill in the sense that they got to go through a lot of stuff to get to the point they want to be at, and it's going to be a little bit of grind. They're definitely going to get their steps in and their workout for their legs. We'll probably actually see that muscle that Duncan Idaho was joking about early on in the film.
Couple more things before we wrap up. I got to give a lot of props to Greg Fraser's cinematography. We were kind of talking about that with the lighting, but just in general, the way he brings these planets to life. Every single frame, like I would happily hang up on my wall as a as a poster, especially this one particular shot of like a sunset. I think that was when Paul and Lady Jessica were in one of like the copters, like escaping from their captives. Like shots like that are just kind of gorgeous to look at. And this movie is full of moments like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that people have pointed out on Twitter and Facebook this weekend about some of its influences, and one of the big ones is Paul looking out at the sunset, a la Luke Skywalker and A New Hope, and it just isn't afraid to kind of understand that it's influenced by. It's so interesting because Dune influenced so many movies we've seen that influence the filmmakers and the cast and crew that are now a part of this iteration of Dune. And it's kind of interesting how time, yes, is a flat circle, and kind of everything comes back around, for one, but two, it's Greg Fraser just kind of putting his stamp on the fact that he has arrived in being in, contention for being one of the best working cinematographers right now. And as I was actually thinking about this recently because of the Batman trailer, which was, quite okay, for the most part, at least for me, is when we talk about cinematography, I think we should start talking about lighting more. Because I think people focus too much on color grading and desaturation or oversaturation or whatever it may be. And I think really what it comes down to is what people actually love is the lighting, or don't love is the lighting. And I think that's something we should mention more, because I think Dune is impeccably lit. It reminded me a lot of Roger Deakins and how he lights his movies, and makes me kind of wish we could have seen what he got with this. But, you just point out a couple scenes in the movie, like when the Bene Gesserit are walking back to their ship, and all that's lighting the screen is the light from their ship, or a mobile light thing that's following them, or the light of a projector on Paul's face. There's just little things like that that are really special and kind of, contribute to the environment and the scale and the scope and the personality of the world and the story and the characters. And that's just, again, it's been a long time since I've gushed about a movie like this on every single level, and it just all works, and it begins and ends with Chalamet, but you have to talk about Denis and Greg Fraser and Hans Zimmer and the supporting cast. It's all just incredible.
If nothing else, this movie is just kind of one of the perfect examples of this being such a collaborative medium, because you can't just chalk it up to one person. Yes, Villeneuve is the one at the helm, but everyone plays a part in creating this masterpiece. Hayden, is there anything that that you want to bring up that we haven't touched upon yet?
I do want to say that I do have a minor nitpick, if anything. I will say I do think it's a little bit of iffy that they have the one Asian guy being the quote unquote traitor, even if they do. I do think they subverted a lot of that pretty well by giving him more of a motive and more sympathetic. I just think that it is something that I noticed.
That's actually I'm glad you brought that up, because I want to ask you, Roman, in the novel, do they go into more depth with the doctor's betrayal?
No, and that's actually the part that I was looking forward to the most, is that entire sequence between Dr. Yue and Duke Leto. And he has a little bit more to say and do in the book, and we've already heard about some deleted scenes, him talking about how they've captured his wife and have them, and he's been his hand has been forced, essentially, and that's in the novel, which is a great sequence. And they played it perfectly, though. They really trimmed the fat there, because it could have got a little bloated, but what they did was allowed us a moment to kind of be like, oh wow, like this is the character that's doing this, even though he's supposed to be sort of what is essentially like a medicine officer for them, in a sense. And what he does for them, or in this story in particular, is he doesn't really want to do what he has to do, but he chooses to do it to potentially not only free his wife, but free a lot of the world. And this was his means of doing it. And that's where a lot of the political intrigue comes into play, that gets expounded or expanded upon it a little bit more in the second half, and certainly in Dune Messiah. So I thought they did a tremendous job with Dr. Yue, and I thought that, and I do agree, though, too, the movie or the story itself is an allegory and sort of allows characters to be resembled from the Middle East. And I feel like they didn't do a great enough job of casting, particularly for that. So for, one of the only people of color on that aren't just a native Fremen. It was kind of a little off-putting, but for the most part, that character is done it pretty well in terms of justice.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I thought I think they did a good job for the most part setting up his character. And a lot of the political intrigue, I would like to see a little bit more of that expanded on in part 2, but I think they gave us enough in this part that I think worked. Now about the casting of the Fremen, yeah, I do agree. We should have maybe seen a little bit more Arabic and MENA representation. That's probably one of the only major criticisms I have. But other than that, I thought those characters were well cast, and they gave strong enough performances that it's not a complete deal breaker, but it is something worth discussing.
I completely agree. Having reservations about a movie doesn't mean that you do not enjoy the movie. And I think that's a nuance that I think a lot more people should be cognizant of.
Right. And I think it's the exact same thing I would say about a movie like The Last Duel, which we talked about before, how a movie can have problematic elements, but that doesn't have to like automatically make or break your enjoyment of the film as a whole. But at the same time, it is okay to acknowledge it while still standing by your opinion.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with any of that. There's always been times throughout film history where there's something in the film that just, movies don't have to justify us morally or ethically, and just need to tell a story as long as it doesn't intrude in misrepresenting a certain people.
Agreed. So it looks like we're starting to wind things down. Any final thoughts? Roman, I'll go to you first.
I don't know, man. I've kind of laid it all out there, and I've spent a lot of my weekend talking about Dune, whether it's verbally with my friends or on podcasts, and just kind of gushing about it. And I'll gush about it, for a very long time, because it is just such an incredible achievement. And I think, I'm one of the people out there that's a little more harsh on the current state of blockbusters and the current state of Hollywood. And for this type of movie to be made in this environment, to end up making the money it did for the property that it is, with a day and date release on streaming as well, pulling away some of its money from the theater going experience, it's just an incredible achievement. Singularly, you can talk about the film, but just outside of that and what it means for Hollywood moving forward, yes, it is getting spin-offs. Yes, it is getting a sequel. Yes, it is setting up a sequel. But the difference between Dune and a lot of other movies that do the exact same thing is that it understands what it needs to do in this story to prepare itself for the following story. And I think too many movies these days are focused on setting up the sequels rather than telling a story in the moment and letting those characters live and breathe in that world and tell their story and their half in this sense of that story. And I just think there's a lot we can learn about Dune and from Dune on how to make movies this big feel deeply personal and passionate. I don't think there's enough passion in Hollywood these days for movies this big. It's all over like independent movies or smaller movies that don't get as many screenings as something like a big Disney movie or a big Fox or what was of Fox or Universal would. And I think that this is kind of paving the way, I hope, for a new generation of blockbusters that understands, love what you're making and channel all of yourself into it, and you'll get one hell of a passionate project that has the entire world reeling. I mean, I haven't really seen much of anybody really dislike this movie or have something overwhelmingly negative to say, besides maybe a couple of people that we might know in our personal spaces. So I'm only speaking from that experience. But at the end of the day, what it did for me in terms of the book, and then what it ended up doing just in the first half of this movie, that what most people are going to experience Dune as, is pretty impressive. And I love it to pieces. And I've only seen it once. I just really want to make sure I give it the time, all 2 hours and 35 minutes of it again very soon.
Well said. I think I agree with a lot of that. To borrow a quote from La La Land, people love what other people are passionate about, and for a filmmaker like Denis Villeneuve to be this passionate about this, like the source material, which if you know the whole franchise of Dune, this is still only one book out of like a dozen, but he's taking the right approach with the material, focusing one film at a time and really giving like all of himself to the material. And for that it really paid off. I'm glad that this movie has more or less united film Twitter. And everyone, barring a few exceptions, seems to be on the same page. Everyone is like giving this movie praise for the performances, the action, just the size and the scope of this all is all just incredible. So Jacob, your final thoughts on Dune Part 1?
It's an arresting, very entertaining. It was a very engrossing film. Whether screen you choose to see this in, it's a good time. It's got good performances. It really gives you a good taste of what's to come.
Hayden, your final thoughts?
No matter what platform you see it on, whether you go see it at your local theater in regular format, or if you go see it in IMAX, or if you go see it in HBO Max, I hope that you can get enjoyment out of it, because how you watch something doesn't necessarily matter with how much you enjoy the film itself. I think it can color how you enjoy a movie sometimes, but it shouldn't be the be all end all. And do what you want to do. I don't think that should be a debate, but this is a really interesting time. I am thrilled that, against all odds, that they're going to be able to make that sequel, and thankful that this is one of those movies that managed to do the impossible with such a huge undertaking of a book.
Oh yeah. Now, just in case the release date changes between now and whenever this episode is released, the current projected date for Part 2 is October 20th, 2023. Hopefully they can stick that to that date, but if not, I'm sure Part 2 will be well worth the wait. But until then, that concludes this episode of Renegade Marquee. Before we head out, Roman, thank you for joining us. Where can everyone find you online?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This is the second podcast I've done on Dune in the last 2 to 3 days. So it's pretty cool to, have the internet space kind of reach out to me and say, hey man, we want to get you on to talk about Dune, a movie you've been greatly excited for, and with your favorite director in the director's chair. But you can find me just on social media, on Twitter at RBC Roman. That's ARB as in boy, ISI, and then my first name Roman, ROMAN. You can find me on Instagram. It's basically the same thing. You can find me on Facebook at Roman Arbisi, and then on Letterboxd as well at the same name. But most importantly, just check out my blog, the Showtime with Roman movie blog. That's where I'm starting to get a little bit more consistent now with my writing this year. It's been a little bit of a down year in terms of movie watching because of the hours I work, but I'm churning it out. I'm trying to get something out this weekend for Halloween. I have a pretty cool idea churning ever since I've watched some of these classic Universal horror movies. So if you love horror and you kind of want to see what I have to say about that, just stay tuned, check it out, follow me on social media. I'll be posting updates very soon. And hopefully I'll have that finished because I think it'll create some pretty good discussions. So other than that, though, again, thanks for having me on, guys. So appreciate it.
Of course. And I definitely look forward to that Universal piece. Hayden, where can everyone find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at the Hayden Wilder or on Instagram at Hayden Wilder.
You can find me on Facebook and Twitter under Jay Crable, KREHBIEL. I'm also part of the Renegade Pop Culture Facebook group, and I have a Letterboxd account called Streamin Damon.
You guys can find me on Twitter at Captain K42. You can check out my quick thoughts on letterboxd.com/Coach K42. And you can find me just in all the various Facebook groups, just at my name. You can check out Renegade Pop Culture on Facebook and Twitter at Ren Pop Culture. You can find us on Podchaser, listen to all of our podcasts on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. And last but not least, everything can be found at renegadepopculture.com. Need an escape? So do we. That'll do it for this episode of Renegade Marquee. We will catch you guys later. Peace out.
Have a good one.